Hi there, and welcome to Conscious Living. I'm Wendy Garrett. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate your time, energy, your attention. And if you have any information that you would like to pass on to me in one way or another, you can connect with me on Facebook or at Empower Radio or online, talkingtonightlights.com. One of those places you can share. I've gotten some suggestions for information that people are interested in, and ideas that you have shared. I appreciate that, and I appreciate some of the shows that I've done have really made an impact on some of the listeners. And I never know who's listening or where this is going. So just, if you're here, you're at the right place at the right time. Today, my guest, I've talked to her before. Marcia Schafer is from BeyondZero.com, and her information is all sorts of metaphysical, paranormal, ET, alien, unusual connections, transcendent experiences. I like to just kind of put that under paranormal because it covers everything from the mystical to the divine to the extraterrestrial. And I think that's a whole catalog of information we could do several shows on. But today we're going to try and narrow it down. Marcia, hi there. However narrow, we're going to start with you as a child have been aware that you are not alone and you've had companions. And could you just kind of give us a beginning? Because I think that in a way gives you a different perspective than a lot of folks who have not had that. And
you chose your words wisely in that last sentence, because that's exactly what it's done. Having the extraterrestrial contact since I've been born has done precisely that in giving me a different perspective. And it's pushed me in a direction throughout my life where I made choices that were different than ones I would have made if I hadn't had that extraterrestrial perspective. The contact experiences gave me a different way of looking at the world, looking at people, at looking at our behavior, at looking at our planet and how we live here. And it gave me the overview of looking at us as a species instead of just the individuals that we are. So it brought me into the inner knowing of the collective impact of our species and our relationship to the planet by having these experiences as extraterrestrials and being exposed to higher types of intelligence that aren't necessarily from the planet Earth. And as a result, I made different decisions throughout my life. Along the way, like so many of us and so many in your audience, I was born with a lot of psychic ability, but I didn't know how to use it. Along the way, I gained wisdom to be a companion to that psychic ability. But the extraterrestrial component, when I was younger, gave me ways to understand how to enhance it and how to use it smartly so that I could be a better tool, not only for myself, but for others. So along with the observations and learning that I've had all about these other species and races who visit us, because there are so many of them out there, I also learned really more about humanity, and that was the biggest gift that I had. And as I said, it made a difference in all the decisions I made and how I shaped my life and how I chose career path moves, self-development moves, etc. I think that this is such a vital piece that we miss by still having to live under the auspices of the formal dictate is there is no extraterrestrial reality. Most of us, I would say, not only in the self-enlightened, if we want to call it that, the group that we are, but also in the intelligent community of just regular everyday people, understand that it is a reality. Even if they haven't experienced it, it's a likelihood for them. And you'll notice even a very, very interesting trend, because in my work, you talked about the metaphysical, but I take the practical applications of the metaphysical and embed it into what are we doing, how do we be productive human beings, and I steer people from a futurist perspective towards the trends and what's upcoming that will really impact our lives. And if you've been paying attention over the past 18 months, there's been an acceleration in the news and in scientific reports being released about extraterrestrial life. And now the perspective that's being chosen by the media is that it's more that it's out there and when will we find it, not that it doesn't exist. And this is a real major shift. And what I've been working with people and clients who work with me is getting them to understand that from what I've been taught, that there are 3 phases to getting a planet that has been isolated and believes that it is only within its own sphere and is not exposed to extraterrestrial reality. There are 3 phases of induction that takes place. And this is the beginning of the second phase. We've been in the first phase for a long, long time, which is just beginning to get introductions to talk about it. People have been throughout the planetary sphere having individual experiences. But when you get into the second phase, you're getting much, much closer to official revelation. And when I say official revelation, it's not just an acknowledgement from governments, but it's also them taking the initiative to let themselves be more known in an everyday manner on the planet. So we're getting pretty close to the point because we've reached phase 2 of getting us ready to know that it's out there. What will happen at the end of phase 2, if we follow protocol, is that there will be most likely some type of announcement that they've discovered remnants of an ancient civilization on another planet. That's usually how it goes. It's like an algorithm that's followed. What that does is it leads the population on the planet who is not necessarily embracing the idea of extraterrestrial reality and still on the fence or unsure or negative about it. It gives them the opportunity for a bandwidth of time to digest the idea that there is intelligent life, or there has been intelligent life out there, without facing it right away and being scared that it's here and I have to deal with it in my everyday life. So it introduces the seed that you're not the only smart species that's out there. There are other intelligent, advanced, cultured civilizations, but they're not here. They're gone. They're extinct. And we had to deal with what happened to them. When that window of time ends, then it is, oh, they are here. And then we have to deal with bridging it into society.
Well, what I think is so fascinating is that, there's still this mindset in a lot of areas that, if they were here, we would see them and it must be a conspiracy because we can't see them and all that. And it's, if they're that advanced, they could get here from planet XYZ across the galaxy. It would make sense. They have cloaking devices. They may not even be in human form. They may have a different form. And our ability to see things with our physical sense it's very limited. And we see certain spectrums where animals and insects see different spectrums. And not only that, we are in some way, shape, or form limited in our psychic abilities because we still have the tendency to say, I don't think to discount and to doubt. And then the society plays into that because somebody who is doing that kind of thing isn't a productive consumer. So, it's all this stuff that gives us basically a cement block or a lid or a cap that induces a limitation instead of saying, well, let's explore these things and these are happening. So for people who need incentive and inspiration and validation, you offer a stepping stone to say, look, you don't have to discount anymore. I've been there. I know what's happening. I can help. And that's why I wanted to bring you back and have people have a validation that their own encounters, their own experiences with contact are not just a fluke, that there's something happening.
Really, really good points, Wendy, and really good ways of looking at it. And so many people who have had the contact experiences, there's so little information out there that it's hard for them to put it into context. And sometimes I think they fall down the road of extraterrestrial mythology, too, in terms of coming to some wrong conclusions and assumptions. This is a pathway that there's so much information to be learned about that everybody has a little piece of the puzzle. And those who have had legitimate face-to-face contact experiences should be putting them into a pot of information The part of information, however, should be packaged in a way like a restaurant offering rather than being thrust into someone's face. I think that when we have information, it's best to put it in terms of, this is what I have experienced and this is what I have learned, rather than putting it forward as the ultimate doctrine of ideology of what this is all about, which is what some people sometimes try to do. What I learned from having experiences with so many different races was that what I thought often was the way isn't. And I learned that the information that I've gained from having face-to-face contact had value within certain sets and circumstances, but it could always change. And to be smart enough to realize that it wasn't always the ultimate truth of the situation. So we always have a piece of the pie, but we never really have the full pie. So by making information available to people, they then have the opportunity to say, that feels right, that doesn't feel right, that matches up to my experience, it didn't match up to my experience. But what I like to caution folks is that it didn't match up to your experience. It doesn't mean it's not true necessarily. It just means that you haven't had that particular situation happen to you or haven't learned that type of thing. I like to give tips to people so that they can do something that is really important, and that is retrain and refocus their conscious awareness during the times that they are having these interludes with extraterrestrial beings so that they can be more in command. We can learn to master our consciousness in new ways to be able to take information back. The reason that's important is that many times a lot of what happens to us is like the tip of the iceberg. We only remember aware of a small piece, maybe 15 to 20%, and the rest of the information is obscured deep within our consciousness. To me, it's a lot like reincarnation, which I work with a lot. The consciousness has access to other lifetime memories, but they're buried in deep, and sometimes they bubble up to the surface and unconsciously influence us in certain ways, and other times they stay recessed and hidden away. The extraterrestrial experiences are like that. They're in there, but usually we only have access to a small part of it. Learning how to master our consciousness and our self-awareness, how to keep aspects of consciousness awake and aware during the interlude that you're in contact with them, helps to bring back and open up the memories that are buried within us about those times and experiences. Oftentimes we'll have a lot of trainings and teachings, but the nature of the trainings and teachings are very different and dependent upon us. They will, it's almost like you get suited to the classroom that you're best matched for. There are those who will be given sophisticated information about science, time, space, consciousness, intelligent behavior like human behavior or other species behavior. And there are others who will have more simple types of experiences that aren't as directly involved with what I'll call educational learning because they're just not ready or at that point. What I learned, though, is that when they see certain things within us, at least not all of them, but some races, that they will elevate us into those experiences and change what happens when we're with them. For example, you may just have very simple observational types of situations with them, simple types of, I'll call it conversation. Usually they do not communicate in language. It's more of a holographic image going back and forth, similar to telepathy. And there's instant knowing of what they want to convey, but you don't always hear the words. Sometimes they'll be telepathic, but you don't always hear the words. So there'll be the information going back and forth. But when they see that you can behave in a certain way or catch something, then they will take you out of those simpler types of interactions and put you into what I call a school, a learning, a training, and that's where the information gets really interesting. So that's why I like people to be able to develop control of their consciousness, their self-awareness, and what's happening, because that's one of the triggers that they will move you into these other more advanced learnings. Now, given that I just said all that, it doesn't mean it always happens. You could still be in an early state, and they could still decide to dump a lot of information in you, but generally that's That's what I noticed, is that when we control our fear, when we're in good shape, basically, and emotionally, or very much on our toes and questioning everything, for me, a big trigger was when I just didn't believe everything they were saying and sharing with me. They seemed to like that. They seemed to like the fact that I was not swallowing what they were saying and just saying, I'll consider it. That, for me, was the big switch where I got exposed to the bigger information and future interactions with them, where I got much more sophisticated information.
Well, part of that, too, is it says your mind is agile. You're working your mind. You're not just going along with whatever it is you're being spoon-fed.
Yes, and that's one of the things that's so important. One of the new trends that we're going to be facing in the coming age is a whole new understanding of consciousness. Science is not only just moving into this area, but it's time and it's an important piece of the puzzle from a social evolutionary standpoint. The man gets a better grip on consciousness. Right now, the average person just thinks of themselves as they are as they go through the everyday life, which is basically personality, ego steering the boat. And it's much more complex than that, and it's very tied in to what we call time-space. And it's going to be a new science. The science of consciousness is going to be emerging. The good news about that is spiritualists like yourself are pretty familiar with a lot of aspects of consciousness, not only what it is today, what the ancients knew and taught about it, how to use it as a tool, but the majority, the large spectrum of people aren't. Having it come in under the wing of science legitimizes a lot of things that mystics have known for a long, long time, and will bring it more into public understanding so that the human can begin to look at themselves with new eyes and see how they are differently from the integrated one solid unit that they believe they are. Such as, Mary Jones out there with 3 kids, working at a daycare, struggling to get by, doesn't necessarily think of herself as an integrated unit of an energy consciousness, a biological piece, the chemical influences that happen and can be controlled, the synaptic junctures that happen with the energy from the cosmos, comes in, feeds into the biological unit and changes the way you think and react. She doesn't think about that. She just thinks about putting food on the table and, what's on Dancing with the Stars. So now we're going to have an opportunity as the years move forward, as science begins to bring it in, not just the higher intelligences, the more educated types of people will begin to grasp it, because that's who usually seeks out that type of information that's in journals. It will begin to filter into more everyday media, and people will have new concepts introduced to them. But again, science will be able to legitimize a lot of things that have just been known by those who walk the enlightenment pathway, and it will begin to reshape how we understand who we are and are fitting in with the universe, the cosmos at large, our relationship to other extraterrestrial species. So when we gain knowledge of ourself, our consciousness, what we call the soul, the entire essence, it's like the heart of the puzzle that will allow us to go forward and reinterpret what it means to be a human being. And therefore, this is all leading us eventually to a more highly evolved, more sophisticated civilization. We like to always dream about peace and prosperity, but it's time to take it out of being a myth into embedding it into a footstep on this planet where we're making it reality. It's going to take a lot of work, and this is why I'm working so diligently right now in a new type of corner than I have been, in terms of it's going to take a lot of work in terms of getting certain people positioned so that they can help make this happen and help this unfold. And to do that, they need to have very good communication skills. And it needs to be not so much about themselves, but they need to understand more about the other people that are out there. And they also need to be looking at us again as a population and not an individual. This latter part is where the shift is coming for those of us who are on the higher consciousness pathway, to realize that we, too, are going to a new level of understanding and action on this planet, and it's time to shift our focus from the development of the self to the development of the collective. So these types of things will be happening on different levels and will be aided and abetted by new trends coming in through technology, through science, social shifts in how we live, changes in the distribution of goods and services. All these things are going to be coming together to subtly reshape our world. And when we think about it and say, well, that's that's a possibility, but it's kind of pie in the sky, just most of us, a lot of us are at the age where we can go back to just look at 1960 to where we are now. Hasn't even been 60 years in just a very short time, two and a half generations. Look at how we've changed from a technological standpoint in terms of not only how we interact with each other, how we relate to each other, and how we relate to the world at large through technological innovations. Gene Roddenberry from Star Trek has had his day. The old transmitter became the iPhone. Beam me up, Scotty is about to happen. The food replicator is just in the past day or so, there have been articles about using the 3D image maker and using it for food replication and what needs to be done for that. So sometimes it's just a few innovative pioneers who see what's happening and they can seed them into the common culture and the society in ways that are somewhat innocuous and fun, but they serve their purpose. And right now, what's coming is like the difference between where we were a couple generations ago where we didn't even have personal computers and all our phones had a cord and we went outside to play, without having play dates or anything of that nature. It was a different world. We are on the onset of a very different world unfolding around us. My focus right now is getting people to recognize that. And it goes back to where we started off in this conversation, is altered perceptions. If you see what's happening beyond the veneer of the everyday minutia, you can help steer what's happening instead of just responding to it. So it's a very, very busy time. We've gotten ourselves through the people's fears of, oh my God, Armageddon, Mayan day of prophecy was about to come and get us and snatch us away through this big cosmic sinkhole. That's in the past. People are now looking at some different types of things, and we don't have that distracting our focus. So now it's about reshaping the world that's unfolding around us. Who's going to be the shapers? And my big message is, if you want to have more of big pharma, the banking industry, and the forces that have not really served us as well as they could have, sit back and do nothing. If you want to have the world you want to see, get off your posterior and start looking at the strategic unfolding of what's happening and how you can effectively participate. And I actually have a large business online that I'm developing right now to be able to formulate and shape people so that they can go out and be effective ambassadors. In the past, I've referred to them affectionately as that you're all in concierge services, because as you're learning, you're also responsible for seeing how much of that you can share in an effective way with others to help open their eyes to other possibilities of what's out there. So we're facing a very large shift, but what often happens is you don't realize it at the time. When large shifts come into cultures, sometimes it's a violent revolution, and you can see it, you hear it. The gunshots are outside. The violence is right outside your door, as it is in certain parts of the world. Other times it's much more surreptitious, and it unfolds in a way that you don't see until after it's been done. It's very subtle, but it's quick. And that latter type of change is what's happening to us now. And that's why it's so incumbent upon all of us to be aware and not settle down and just get comfortable and think it's going to unfold. Our collective journey is about learning how to work together as a demographic to make this happen so that we can reach the new level of civilization. The reason this is all so important, the way reason it's unfolding so quickly, is that it has to tie back in with extraterrestrial reality, as we are on the crest of understanding that we're part of a larger collective that's out there. not just here on the planet, and how we fit in. But before we do that, we have to bring the population up to certain standards. So they have to have new understanding of space-time. They have to have an enhanced understanding of life in societies. They have to be able to have the scientific knowledge that explains to them why a creature can do certain things, can travel in certain ways, can behave in certain ways, can create certain illusions. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it's happening very fast, and it's happening very subtly. And I want people to be aware of it so that it's not so subtle, and they take the reins for what they want to see unfold. It's
We're going to have to
marvelous
take a break.
time right now. I'm sorry?
What I want to do, we're going to have to take a break, but I want to come back and pick up on that illusion thing and also bring it back to the personal experience level, because that's what's happening right now. People are being introduced. I want to suggest a couple of ways of how this might already be ongoing for them. So we're talking with Marcia Schafer, and beyondzebra.com is the website. We're going to talk more about this after we take a quick break. You're listening to Conscious Living on Empower Radio. Hello there. This is Conscious Living. I'm Wendy Garrett on Power Radio. Thanks for tuning in. We're back with Marcia Schafer, Beyond Zebra. What I wanted to pick up with was when you gave me the word illusion was perfect, because that's the way some of this happens. Appearances may not be what they seem. And with my stuff going into the shamanic element, going into the dream time, working with things on an altered plane or in a different dimension, all of that stuff, I've learned that when these experiences happen, it depends on what level you are at in your own conscious awareness. If you've been able to tune out some of your own self-talk, your chatter, all of that stuff, that gobbledygook that runs in the background and sometimes runs amok, and would encourage you to think along mainstream lines of, this is all concrete. The only thing that exists is what I see in front of me, what I can pick up and what I can touch, and everything else is gobbledygook. Okay, once you get beyond that, and you're able to say, there is more here and I'm going to experience it. In my way, I've done a surfing. Instead of swimming with everything, it's surfing to see, okay, how much of this resonates for me? How much of this can I incorporate? Or do I need to move on to something that is more, I guess, complementary, something I can work with? And what I have been exposed to as a result with this other encounter, whether it's ET, transdimensional, non-corporeal, whatever it is the very basic need for us to disengage from our autopilot preset of labeling everything that we think we know, because there's a whole lot here that we don't know. So how can you address that for us?
Well, you're right on in what you said, because that's one of the things that the humans do. Now, remember, I started off saying is I look at us very differently. I look at us as a species, and humans have certain tendencies. The tendencies that you refer to, such as labeling, and helps the human to understand his world and to put it into some type of order that makes sense for him. And that takes out the fear of life. So the behavioral pattern that you were just referring to is something that served man for quite some time. But now man is being asked to go to a level of more higher development. And that means what you referred to and you talked about the illusion is that we now have to look at things differently. And we have to see what is around us and understand what's the underpinning behind it. What does it mean to us? Is it an illusion that we've felt comfortable with that has helped serve us in the past? Or can we now see it perceptively in a different type of way? People are going to a new level of understanding at an unprecedented rate, it seems. They are unfolding rapidly to look at the issues all around them, the things that you just brought up, and say, wait a minute, I see life differently. There is a switch that seems to have gone on in a large percentage of the population where they're doing just what you alluded to, penetrating through the illusion of everyday life and looking at it more in terms of a journey in conscious awareness. It's not happening to everybody. It's happening to a small percentage of the population. But to some degree and to some scope, it does seem to be cascading out in different ways into the larger population. It's just not impacting everybody the same.
Well,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Let me suggest it, because it may not be happening on a superficial level where we're able to say, here's the 5 o'clock news, blah, blah, blah. What I suggest is it's happening in a different way for many great numbers, which then influences their daytime ability to say, I might, as you say, entertain this. Let me entertain this idea, where before it would be an absolute, no way, and out the door. But now, because they are being in some way, shape, or form impacted by the collective, the consciousness, the acceptance of people who have credentials. We go back to that science thing, that there's something going on here, that we are getting all these reports. And even though they have been in some manner hidden, dismissed, devalued, I'm talking about the UFOs and generals on the record who are talking about all the things they experienced that they could not explain, and the things that they encountered physically that they could not explain. Well, then people who are having dreams and having other types of encounters up close and personal, not in planes, but right there in their own living room or in their own dream space, are saying, all right, these guys are experiencing it here in the manifest plane. Maybe some of my stuff is related to that. To give you a more open sense of, let me see if I can accept this without it shifting my whole world and calling my reality into question. Does that make sense?
It does, and it does seem to reflect what is happening. Another piece to add on to what you just shared is that a couple of years ago, extraterrestrial communication conveyed to me that they are working with a large part of the planet in our sleep states to get us ready for us, which brings in the influence once again of the unconscious mind. I found it really shocking, and I wasn't sure whether or not I believed it at the time, but what was conveyed was that almost the entire planet and every society is now being worked with in certain ways to get them to think a little bit differently and be ready for new types of concepts and ideas, where before it had just been isolated pockets of people that they had worked with. At least that was my impression. So,
can I give you a suggestion on how sometimes that might work?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and this is one I can identify because it was a pattern. It was a sequence of events, and I knew it was non-corporeal. It was ET. It was a way of probing and getting more information about me in a certain area, and it had to do with because I have done shamanic work, because I've done dream work, because I've done this other altered state type of work. I knew this is not my preset. This is not something I would choose to dream. It's being seeded. And there's a reason. So what's the reason? So I go back into it, and there are certain people that I have had relationships with, friendships. And it was an examination of this relationship pattern that I had and how I developed friendships with specific types of people within my career or the area that I have of aptitude, which is communication. It happens to be one was in television, one was in radio, one was in media of another form. And they were a type of relationship that allowed me to work cooperatively, creatively, and in a way that was a complementary relationship. And I thought, this is a way of examining my emotional state and how I engage or disengage when I'm introduced to a certain type of personality, relationship, area of expertise, and how I will excel given how I am interacting with my companion, my partner, or my cohort. And it was amazing Because then when I went back to look at it, I knew how it was happening.
Talking about. You know, there is a lot of self-work and self-reflection that we do in the unconscious states, and we do with the assistance of those who aren't necessarily human or something that we're familiar with, that serves us in a very simple but profoundly powerful way to become wiser. And becoming wiser is what happens when you gain better self-understanding. And so, you know, what you just described is a really good example of the things that go on. So many people are having so many different types of experiences with paranormal types of things, whether they want to call it spirit guides, extraterrestrial contact, abilities within themselves being enhanced, intuitive knowing. It's a time when people are really starting to expand beyond life as they've known it and drift into something new. So I think it's really an exciting time. It's unfortunate that this is all buried, because all we get exposed to in the general population are the difficulties and challenges, the murders, the terrorism acts, the acts of nature that cause devastation. And what's not being covered that I see so often throughout my work are the radical shifts that are happening in terms of the things that people are doing that are so exciting, that are leading us to new ways of living our lives, new types of communities, new types of educational systems, new types of food and commerce and communities that are training people to live differently. I mean, it's really fascinating, but we just get the the overview of that from the media. And so that's one of the areas that needs to be reformed, is the media needs to be balanced out a little bit differently.
That's a whole different, that's asking a lot of the media, because in terms of, my own participation in that, the media, there's a thing of, if it bleeds, it leads. It is there to inform, not necessarily entertain. In some ways, it's actually shifting focus, because as a participant or as somebody who is a user of media, you really aren't aware of how everything is formulated to make the presentation, and it's done specifically to keep you glued to the tube.
It's one of the most powerful influencers on the planet. In centuries past, when they didn't have the media developed as much as it is in this particular time frame, it was more up to political and religious leaders to shape, inform, and lead the people. But there's a new tool in the age, particularly the last 100 years, and it's grown and grown and grown. And where you pointed out the media was originally to inform, it's actually to shape and to influence, is how it's being wielded. So what I do is, when I talk about there needs to be change, when I work with people, we really don't change what's out there. We build parallel systems where new forces will be available, and if they do the job right, they will attract the audience.
I think when you're looking at shaping and forming and doing all of that, and I'm going to go back to the media thing, I don't know that that was the original intent. I think they discovered that it was extremely effective, so that when people are watching the media in this constant diet of horrific, horrendous, awful, excruciatingly painful drama, then it keeps people from focusing on other areas that would be more productive, more self-enhancing, more creative, and in a greater good, more helpful for all of us. But it's tough to disengage from the drama when it's so seductive. Does that make sense?
It can be done, though. It can be done. And it can be done by training and understanding in human behavior individually and in mass collectives. And that's where I've had a lot of information and training from those on the other side. And that's what I'm passing on now in the next phase that I'm going into is with the people that I work with. The emphasis is now on greater understanding of the human condition and behavioral motivators. But if we were going to do it the same way, then we would just repeat the pattern of influencing and moving people to behave in a certain way. Now the key and the trick is to give people the opportunity to understand how they're acting and give them the choice. It's a much more difficult way to lead a species, to change. It is much easier, as we've seen throughout thousands of years, to manage people in a certain leadership function, under a certain leadership method, than it is to give them the opportunity to the path of enlightenment. It's much more work. It's much easier to manage the herd, basically.
Well, but there's a reason for that. It's because you can then, in a way, know the outcome. When you're asking for people to do this on their own, then they come back with all of these different unpredictable outcomes. It creates a sort of chaos that then doesn't feed the general line of everybody in lockstep. We all want to do this together. We don't want to leave anybody behind. So if you're going too far ahead, we're going to make you go back to the back because we don't want them to. It's all of this thing of, yeah, exactly what you used.
Yeah, but
guiding the herd.
Creative genius has always been fostered by unfettered restraints. And creative genius is tampered down when you have a lot of controls in place. Even if you look within the business industry and the 1980s and 90s when they were so involved, and still are to some degree, in meeting industry standards and the total quality management method, those methods foster, just as you were pointing out, reaching a common collective goal. But they do not provide an environment for creative genius. And it's creative genius that has always given us the great leaps forward. The Steve Jobs, whether it was Edison or, someone of this generation, people who are bringing in the inventions and the tools that we need don't need to be harnessed. They need to have the types of forums which they can flourish under and bring it to fruition. I can tell you firsthand that somebody who is very intelligent and very creative has a hard time functioning in a team process because oftentimes they're paired with those who aren't at the same par and they hold them back. And so they spend so much of the time trying to accommodate or, manage the team dynamics, when if you let them go, they will create a really wonderful product that can be brought back. So we need a little bit of everything right now, but we need the trust to see what will happen. As long as there can't be a place for violence and, deviations of harmful behavior. But we need the trust to be able to lead the people to understand what they have been exposed to, how they have been harnessed, and give them a choice what they want to do. But Wendy, you and I both know that a lot of people don't want anything else. They would prefer the status quo. So this is something that's going to take generations and generations and generations. The changeover, a lot of people think it's overnight. It's not. It's going to take several hundred years. And that's what we have to understand. It's, fostering the future generations by laying down the right seeds in the moment of now.
My thing by presenting this, because I have been in the media and I've seen, I didn't want to, do the same old, crank out the same old stories day after day after day and say this is what's important, because I don't believe it is. I also know that if you are trying to go out and do something different, then you have to have your own self-supporting energy that says what I am doing is worthy, no matter if it's one person or 100,000. I am making a difference. And so that's a really strong factor. I want to know, back at the beginning, when you had this ET contact, what was it that gave you the fortitude, the internal will that said, I will listen to this as a guide, as opposed to everything outside me, because that's crucial.
I'm laughing because it's really, it's a good question, but it's not going to be the answer you want. I actually am a very non-compliant subject, and I've come kicking and screaming the whole way. And my life was faced with certain curves where I was forced to do certain things because circumstances stripped everything away from me, and I had to fall into it. So I always wonder why they stuck with me when I was such a pain in the neck and wouldn't listen and always said, no, I don't believe you, blah, blah, blah. When if I had just gone forward with grace and trust, I probably would have had a much easier pathway.
I love it. No. I absolutely agree. Because when I refer to myself, it's like I'm a 3-year-old kicking and screaming, going 2 steps forward. Or no, 1 step forward, 2 steps back, because I didn't have the idea in the first place, and it can't be real because nobody else validates it. And dang it, go away, because I've got better things to do. Will you quit pushing me? Quit talking. Go away. And then they sit right there and go, la, 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 la.
Yeah. And so I don't know if you went through it, because I'm very similar in certain manners that, life circumstances took a certain pathway. I believe that I made those choices in pre-life decisions that if I wasn't going along a certain way to achieve an outcome, that I was just going to face, see what I would do in moments of crisis, and if I would make the right decisions. And
they dump everything out. You think you've got it all neat and tidy, and they go, here, try this. And then you find out, it actually didn't end. I didn't get crucified. I'm still here. I may have to start from scratch. And the public humiliation or the personal, when you go through and say, I have just been a complete and total failure, and this is not going to go. And yet it isn't the end of the world. And you think, this is kind of fun here. Nobody's paying attention anymore. I can do what I want.
I've never really cared about also public humiliation. I'm one of those people that, I can keep secrets. I don't care what's in your medicine cabinet. I don't care what you think of me. If you don't like me, I'm very sorry. As long as I didn't do anything to offend you, everybody, I'm just not for everybody. But I don't really care, and I think that's really helped a lot also, and not being overly caught up in what do people think of me, do I have to be accepted or whatever. I just want to make sure that despite all my human and personality idiosyncrasies, that I do remember to be kind and tolerant and compassionate to others. And I'm still working on a lot of it. I can be a real pain in the neck.
Yeah, we all are. That part of it, though, I think is crucial. It's the ego that you're talking about. We get our ego in check. And so you get a few bruises and you realize, well, that isn't really part of me anyway. That's, I can do anything one way or the other, and how my public persona goes out isn't anything I really have to worry about, because as long as I know in my heart that I have walked to the best of my ability the things that I was given to do, that I have performed to the best of my ability, then that's all I can be held accountable for, because that is where I live, and that is where I come from, and that is where I'm going. It's that. And there's a humility that comes with that whether it came with the package or whether it was hard-earned or presented as a necessary part of the package, when you become more aware that it's all so fleeting. These moments we have here are tremendously incredible. And then you appreciate it all and say, I want to be here doing the things I came to do, instead of something that everybody else dumped on my plate and said, this will make you acceptable and rich and famous and you'll be happy.
And that's part of the issue, is getting to the core. What did you come here to do? What were some of the main things? And I deal a lot with that in the beginning when I work with people. That's what we focus on and discuss, is looking at, the soul messages of the main things that came here to be done. But also in regards to what you were talking about, is that that's also what we learn on the pathway of being here for a while, because the aging process is really a fascinating thing to go through, not only from the biological perspective of the differences in your body, but the way that we look at life. And, we start out young and we know it all, and the older people are just a pain in the neck, and they're trying to tell us, and, they don't see things from our perspective. You don't understand me. I have different viewpoints. All the things that happen at every phase of aging, whether you're a teenager or a young adult. But when you get into different later generations, which now that we have a different type of lifestyle, people are living longer and are living more healthily, they're now going through a longer continuum of understanding and growing on the planet. And so a lot of us are now at a phase where we've reached an age, especially this big groundswell of the baby boomers, where we're looking at life differently. We're looking at what we've learned instead of just being in the midst of the experience. And we're saying we have so many years left. What are we going to do with it?
Marcia, I have a question.
That's a big issue for a very big population group that's here and is coming to its closing doors, which is the baby boomer group.
So this next phase, when this contact is more pronounced and more overt, how do you know that you're in contact with ET intelligence? How do you know?
Well, that's an important question because it's very different with face-to-face contact than it is when you have channeling or intuitive meditations. Let me tell you, when one is appeared suddenly before you, there's no doubt. For me, I always feel what I call the dimensions warp. I don't know if that's what happens, but that's what it feels like. You feel very differently, and it's as different as if I were to jump in a pool of water, and the sensations around me are so different. So, the sensations are different. For me, usually with many of the races, I feel a great rush, similar to almost like a little shot of Kundalini or something going on there. It's like I call it an energy signature that I recognize when they're coming through and they're there. Some species, not all, will have a premonition or a forewarning that something's probably going to happen the next day or two, and other times it's like I shared with you before the show that there was a scorpion in my bed, and I had no idea. I didn't even intuitively pick up on it. And sometimes it's like that. It's like I should have known, but I didn't, and boom, they're right there. Oftentimes it will happen in the early morning hours, and for me, over the years, not always, but oftentimes they've woken me up. They've pulled me out of a sleep state. So I become self-aware as I'm in a dream state of consciousness, and I'm dragged back to contemporary reality. But, it can be at any point in time during the day, during the evening, in a place where you might not suspect it. The majority of the time, for me, however, has been usually between 1 and 3, 3 and 5 a.m. in the morning. And as I said, you turn over and you see one right beside your bed. It's very different from channeling. It's very different from when they communicate with you telepathically.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of a shock there that happens.
Okay. So that sets the tone. We've got a minute. I want you to share your information very quickly so people can contact you for more details.
Best way to get to me is beyondzebra.com. All the information is up on the website there, info@beyondzebra.com, and I will definitely get back to people. There is a large upcoming online salon that I am building right now that should be open in a few months, where we're going to bring together a lot of people with a lot of training and information and allow them to go forward with collective empowerment. So that's something I think people will be interested in. But,
I want to reconnect with you then, okay? Because
terrific.
Yay. Well, maybe before, but then for sure. Thank you. Marcia Schafer, Beyond Zebra. I really appreciate your time. I love what you're doing, and I think people need a resource to go to validate the things that are happening right now within the subconscious collective. Thanks for listening, Empower Radio.